Wop! Ah. All right, guys. 2022. You know who it is. Ryan D at ZZP.
And I'm Al.
We're for another Behind the Builds. This time, we're talking about turbo lag myths. All right, guys, so there's a lot of things that we kind of hear misconceptions on almost every day. One big thing we hear is some of these supercharged guys are, I want my boost and I want it now.
It's my boost and I need it now.
Or turbos are too laggy. Or other random, metaphor that you think that turbos are super laggy and, just slow. Let's attack the first thing first, turbo lag. There are quite a few things that determine how fast a turbo will spool. Number one, you have manufacturer. Number two, the material that the compressor and the turbine wheels are made out of. The number three, the AR of the exhaust housing. And number four, your setup on your vehicle, whether that's cams, how aggressive the tuning is, on VVT cars specifically, how quickly the tuner helps ramp in the boost.
Even the fuel you run makes a difference.
Exactly.
I mean, it's a lot more noticeable when people run methanol. You can spool a turbo way faster. But even going from pump gas D85 on a dyno, you can see a difference.
Oh, yeah.
It'll pick up a few hundred RPM.
So me and Al, you've seen us on the podcast. We talk a lot about proper setups for the vehicle.
That's the number one thing.
Yes. So if you have a 1.4 with a 65 millimeter turbo and a 1.08 AR housing, you're probably not going to spool till probably the 25th of never. So you'll be shifting.
I mean, if you brake boosted at $8,000 long enough,
I mean, anything can spoil at
it'll
that
probably
point.
get there.
Maybe. But for most of us that are doing daily driving and get on the highway and want to downshift and go, yeah, you're going to have a lot of lag. So for 1.4 instead, you do get a housing with a proper AR. You would get a smaller turbo that overall, so you can spool it quicker and still make good power. Turbo technology is not what it was in the 80s and 90s anymore, guys. So we see a lot of some of our older customers saying, oh, the turbos are real laggy and they don't make any power.
And they used to be. That used to be the truth. And even into the early 2000s, there were some good options starting to come out, but twin charge kits were usable back in the day because the affordable turbos were a little bit on the laggy side, well, at least compared to what we're used to now. Mm-hmm. But technology has come, and it's not just the turbo technology, it's the fuel that we have and the tuning capabilities that we have. And the understandings that we have about different things. You can get a setup to be way more responsive than you used to be able to. But still, to this day, the number one problem that we see when someone is complaining about lag is they just don't have the right setup. I hate seeing guys that run like a S257 at 18 PSI.
Oh, God.
Why are you doing that? There's smaller turbos that would make the same power and spool faster. So you made your own problem, so I don't really feel bad for you there.
Also, and I'll count this out here, some of y'all just can't drive. If you guys...
That's also true.
Wop! Guys, shift your cars. If you are dropping 4,000 or 5,000 RPM between shifts, that's a problem. It doesn't have to be hard. You don't have to go ripping it through the dashboard, but give a good, quick shift in the car. That's also going to help the turbo to stay spooled as well.
Yeah.
Then there are most of the modern cars or manuals also have no lift shifting, which helps as well. Or the N2MB Y boxes, that helps as well. There are quite a few things that you can do as a driver to properly spool and keep your car spooled. Also, selecting the proper gear. If you are on the highway and someone tries to race you and you are gear up, your turbo's gonna be real laggy. It's gonna be really, 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 really laggy. Versus you dropping a gear and let her eat.
So one of the things that I'll commonly see in data logs when I'm remote tuning people, customers would email back complaining about the lag on the Z54, which I think is a pretty fast spooling turbo.
Not laggy.
But then I open up their data log, and they're doing full throttle runs, but shifting at $6,000. So they're coming into the next gear below the turbo's boost threshold. Like, of course there's going to be lag when you're driving it wrong. Like, there's nothing that I can tune around to change that. So then that kind of is always, I wouldn't say blown my mind, but it's always made me look twice and kind of wonder what people are thinking. Like, if you're going to go out and race your car, you're not going to shift before the red line. You're going to go all the way out. And then you're going to come back into the next gear at a higher RPM, and the turbo is going to be wound up ready to go. Like, that is the only scenario in which the lag actually matters. Now, if your turbo is so big that you rev it out to red line and you still shift in below your boost threshold, which I've done before on my car, playing around with stuff and trying different things, then you sized it wrong. And I've done some wrong sizing on purpose just to screw around with it. And that's what led to the first compound setup that I ever did. Which is a lot of fun.
So guys, once again, like we say in our remote tune videos and numerous other videos, floor your cars. Not 70%, not 75, not 62, not 31. 100%. Pedal through the floor, all the way down.
All the way down.
Floor your cars. Take it to red line. If you are shifting at 5,000 or 6,000 when your red line is 7,000 to 8,000, stop it. Stop it.
Like, if I wanted you to stop at $6,000, I'd put the rev limiter there.
There's a reason why we have these high revving 4 cylinders. In most cases, some other cars, are 6-cylinder guys. You don't need to rev that high. But there's a reason why we have a red line. That is where you're supposed to be at. You're supposed to shift at the red line.
Another thing that has come a long way, even outside of the turbo technology itself, is the computer technology. So like the fuel tech that I run on my car, it's so damn good at getting the turbo wound up that, like, when I quarter mile race my car, the turbo that I have on, it's an EFR 8374, has an 82 AR T3 frame V-band housing on it. If I just start like in third gear and floor it, it doesn't hit full boost till 5,500 or so. So most people would be like, oh my goodness, that's a big laggy turd. Well, not for the application that I'm running it in.
Exactly.
Because I can build the boost on the two-step on the line, launch the car, and then the no-lift shift and anti-lag is so advanced in the modern ECUs that I actually gain boost on the shift.
Amazing.
My last time out, I actually lifted the head gasket on the 3/4 shift, not even during the run, because I went from 40 pounds to 44 pounds in between the 3/4 shift. So like, there is no time in that entire run where I'm ever waiting on the turbo to spool. So it just, no matter which angle you're coming at this from, if you have a problem with lag, there's something wrong with either your setup or the way that you're driving the vehicle.
Yes, and setup, again, this is why we always tell people to build your setup and base your turbo off what you're trying to do. A lot of people want the biggest number you can get. I myself sometimes have this problem too, but there are times, shut up, Al.
He's very bad with this problem. I want the big one. I want the big one.
Sometimes you have to know what you're going to do and set and pick your turbo for what you're going to do.
And trust our advice.
Yes.
We've been there. We've done this stuff. Like, when you're putting an order in with us, it makes no difference in our paycheck which turbo you get.
Yes.
But we are trying to help you pick the one that you're actually going to enjoy.
Yes.
Like, when I have a customer that's looking at the entry-level kit and they're like, I want to make, 350 on pump gas. Like, well, you can do that with the 54. Get that. Well, but I want the 57.
Okay,
then it's going to spool a little slower and make the same power, and you're going to complain.
Yes.
So one of the things you'll hear people complain about with turbo setup versus a blower is, I don't want to lose my low end torque. Like, dude, this isn't a dump truck. And even if it was, dump trucks run turbos. So I'm not sure what you're trying to worry about this low end torque. Like, you're not racing someone taking off from 2,000 RPM, ever. So I understand this. This is like getting me to the point like the grinds my gears stuff. Like, I understand if you favor superchargers, that's fine, but don't try to use reasons that don't make any sense to justify it. I like blowers. If I had a second LSJ as a daily driver, I would leave the blower on it because they are fun to bomb around town in. Mm-hmm. Now, when we're nitpicking this turbo lag stuff, we're talking about like significant lag. Yes, there is a tiny difference between even a really small turbo setup and a supercharger. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about the difference that you would feel when you're racing the car. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is the actual size of the power band of the vehicle. So if you're able to rev out to a point that you're coming back into the next gear at an RPM that the turbo is full send at, then the whole lag conversation is really irrelevant. You spool it once, it stays spooled. But you do have to learn how to drive the car within its RPM range.
To reiterate that, your power band, the width of your power band matters a lot. So if your turbo setup on your car, if you have a 2,000 RPM, power band, that's not that great. That's not good. You have
in like the markets we deal with, like the Ecotec stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an Ecotec trans out there that has less than a 2,000 RPM drop on a gear change. So if you've sized your turbo to the point that that's the width of your power band, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like you size things wrong.
Yes.
And that's your own fault. That's why you have turbo lag.
Yes. So again, and guys, even so for the peak numbers guys too, kind of talk about you guys that get too big of a turbo to just have a peak number. Usable power band is king overall. The guy next to you, I've seen it 100 times. The guy next to you, on the dyno, I make 620. But the guy you're racing is like, well, I'm maxed out at like 530. And what happens is you're going to race, and he's going to jump out on you. And then you're going to be catching him and shift. All back and forth. So you have to make sure that you are not setting your car up to not do what you want to properly. Again, power band is key. Gearing, your setup, your fuel, all these things that Al and I have talked about today. These are common things that people have this stigma about turbos with. It is not true. You have to set yourself up properly and get your car where you want it to for what you're doing. At that point, all these myths will go out the window and be behind you, just like all those slow supercharged guys will be.
You just have to be honest with yourself from the beginning. Really understand how much power you actually want out of the vehicle, and then size everything and build everything appropriately. You just start throwing the parts that sound good, doesn't usually work out too well.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I think we pretty much covered everything here today. Obviously, if you guys have any questions, you can hit us up at customer service at ZZPerformance.com. As usual, I'm Ryan D at ZZP.
And I'm Al. And if you do size your turbo wrong and it's too laggy, you can always just spray it.
See you guys next time.